All right. Most of you, and everybody can hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Most of you already know us. We've been coming up to Shrug for quite some time now. I am the owner and founder of Panda Consulting. We're a professional services firm located in Florida here. And when I was talking to Shrug about making presentations, I actually said, well, we can go and present on anything you want. And the first suggestion was the one I'm going to do tomorrow, which is creating a Department of Revenue compliant cadastral parcel data. The other one was someone said, well, why don't you do something on the attribute rules? Because we recently saw the workshop you did on attribute rules and we thought it was very interesting. So this is what we're going to do here is we're going to go and take about 45 minutes and go over attribute rules on here. And we're not going to waste any time by going through any introductions or anything. You know who I am. If not, you can look us up in pandaconsulting.com. So let's start off with this. What are attribute rules? Attribute rules basically are the newer version of Attribute Assistant, except they're on steroids. They're a lot more than just Attribute Assistant used to be. You can think of them this way, that they are comparable to the topology rules that have been inside of ArcGIS for a while now, except they focus on attributes. The biggest difference is the fact that the attribute rules themselves are stored inside the geodatabase. They're not a separate table that's out there. They're actually stored in the geodatabase themselves, and they are applied against a feature class or a feature service so that you can use them on standard file geodatabases. You can use them on web services when you put them in here. There's also 3 varieties of attribute rules, and we're going to go through all of them and what the differences are, when they go and become evaluated, and how you can utilize them. The 3 varieties are calculations, constraints, and then validation. And the biggest thing is that they all use the arcade scripting language as their programming language. So you really need to become acclimated and comfortable with arcade more than anything else. And I think that Ned is giving a session on arcade later in the conference, but you really should learn arcade. It's what's on here. However, and this is a big warning for you, make sure that you're comfortable with them, because once you apply an attribute rule to a feature class, that feature class can no longer be read by ArcMap. It becomes in the geodatabase and it's associated with the feature class, but once you put an attribute rule on there, it can no longer be read by ArcMap or any of the older technology, any of the older ESRI technologies on there. So once you understand that, you can get off and be running with this. It's one of the most amazing tools that are built into ArcGIS Pro now. All right, so let's talk about the components of an attribute rule. Each attribute rule contains these components. It contains attribute fields for which this rule applies. It contains an arcade expression that should be evaluated or will be evaluated. And then it includes triggers on when that expression actually does get evaluated on here. So how does this work then? Let's go and look at this here. Here's the 3 types of attribute rules that are in here. The first one over on the left-hand side is a constraint rule. We'll talk about that shortly. The calculation rule is the one that we're immediately going to go on, and this is the one that most people become familiar with early on, is the calculation. And then finally, there's an evaluation rule, a different set of rules. So let's look at the calculation attribute rule. What it does is it populates the attribute rules according to what the arcade expression goes and it gets evaluated as. And there are two different ways that it can be fired off. It can be fired off during an immediate calculation, which is as soon as the edit occurs on here, or because these can be implemented against web services, you can have a batch calculation where it becomes evaluated not when the edit is made, but when it actually goes through and gets evaluated over on the server. All right. The thing to remember also is that these arcade rules, they only get evaluated against dirty features. And again, this is the reason why I make that analogy, that it's similar to topology rules in that as you make an edit, that feature that's edited against gets marked with an edit mask that's dirty. So an edit has been changed on it and it's not been evaluated as far as any of the topology rules or any of the attribute rules that are in here. So again, we get into this concept of what is a dirty feature, what's one that's been evaluated and is clean, and it's the same sort of thing. The attribute rules only get evaluated against features that have been marked dirty. All right, let's start off with a very, very simple attribute rule demo, and we'll go from there. So this is ArcGIS Pro, and I've got two simple feature classes in here. One is called parcel polygons, the other one is called section polygons. And in order to go and implement an arcade rule, what we do is we right click on a layer, and under data design, we have, what's going on here? Why don't I have this? Let me go in, try it on this side. There we go. I have an attribute rule. And when I pull up that attribute rule, it gives me a form in which I can go and create a new attribute rule on here. I'm actually going to take this attribute rule that's existing. That's it. If I look across the tab, here is a calculation rule, here is a constraint rule, and here's the validation rule. And we'll go over these again. So a calculation rule. Let's start off by creating a simple calculation rule. So I'm going to go and add that calculation rule, and I'm going to go over on the dialog box that pops up, and I'm going to just say, let's make this one calculate the acreage. And I could go in and go and put a description in there. And then I can actually go in and enable attribute rules against subtypes if I have them defined. In this case, I do not. So what I'm going to do is pull down and say, let's go ahead and calculate the map acres on here. So again, I give it a name, description. Description is not necessary. Whether or not it's a subtype and the field is going to be on there. And I'm going to go and I'm going to write out the arcade expression as far as what this is going to do. And I'm going to pop up this arcade expression so that it's easier to go and look and see what I'm doing. In this case, the first thing I'm going to do is a really simple expression, and I can pick it over here and say I want to do the area of it. And then I tell it what I want to do the area of, what do I want to value it against. And there is a global variable inside of Arcade called $feature. $feature says anything that I create, anything that I'm evaluating, whatever that feature is, a polygon or a line or a point, go ahead and use that and iterate through that for everything I put in here. And then on the area function, I actually can tell it what area unit I wish it to calculate. So if I put in square foot, it will then calculate it in square feet, or if I put in acres, I can put it in there. If I put it in hectares, it'll put it in there. So the area function basically just says area, and then in parentheses, put what's being evaluated and how you want that to be returned. And I'll go and I'll validate this and say, yes, this arcade expression is valid. And I'll say, okay. So there is the attribute that I'm going to go and evaluate. Here's the actual arcade expression. The next thing I have to do is tell, well, when does this rule trigger? And in this case, I'm going to say, whenever I create something, when I insert something, go ahead and evaluate this rule. Or I can tell it to do it whenever I update the shape of this feature. In this case, it's going to be a polygon. Go ahead and evaluate again. You could also go and do it during the delete so that it can be done during the deletion. And then as we go down further here, well, when does it get evaluated? When is this rule actually executed? For the most part, if you're working with file geodatabase, you don't have to deal with this, but you can tell it to don't evaluate it with the desktop application, only evaluate it with the web server, or I can do it in batch mode, and you'll see that when I start looking at some of the constraints and other validation on here, or I can tell it to go and disable this rule right now. I don't want to apply it. So as I'm done with this, and again, I can put tags in here for whatever I want in here. I'm not going to go and do that on this demo. Once I've got that complete, and this attribute rule is now complete, I can go ahead and save it. One of the things that often will happen is that if you are, if you go and create an attribute rule and you don't have a save option available, really all it means is that you've got an edit open that's not been saved and you have to save your edits. So you would go over to the feature class and save those edits for it. So now let's watch and see what happens. As I go and start editing, I'm going to start edit and I'm going to create, in this case, I'm going to create a parcel polygon here. And as I create this parcel polygon, all right, well, I actually have another attribute rule here that's on here, and it says you've got to have some value in there. And I'll go ahead and let's take that off. So let's undo this. Let's go and discard that edit out. Let's go back here to the attribute rules. And I'm going to go and delete that right now. All right. Go back to editing. Let's go and create a parcel polygon. And as I created that parcel polygon, I can go in here and I see that, in fact, the map acres was automatically calculated for me as I was going through here. Now, because I have that filter being not just when I create the parcel, but when I go and edit that in any way, if I go in here and just select that and say, edit my vertices, as I go and move my vertices around, it will go and change my attribution from 2 acres to 3.23 acres. So it automatically goes and calculates it as I'm going through here. Simple little expression, and it will automatically fire off every time I go and create something, or anytime I go and modify the shape, modify that feature in any way. And that's important because it's on here. Let me go back here again. I've got it set up to go and create and execute this rule when I create the parcel and when I update it or modify it. And it's important to recognize it's not just a modification of the shape, but any modification will cause this to go and fire off. So that means that if it's an attribute that I'm changing, when I go and change an attribute, when, for example, I go and put a quality control number in here, it actually goes and fires again. And anytime I apply it, it goes and fires this thing off again. So just be aware of that with your arcade rules, if you have update, anytime you update a feature, it's going to go and execute those and evaluate those rules on here. All right, are we okay with that? So by the way, if there's any questions or anything, just go ahead and put them in the chat window or put them in the questions. And Michael, if you would just go and interrupt me. I have no problem being interrupted on here either. All right.
Frank, we've got a couple of questions already, but I was waiting till the end. We can go ahead and do those now if you want.
This way I can address them now.
Can the expression be in Python from Andy Wober?
No, unfortunately. The attribute rules all use arcade and only arcade on there. So sorry about that, Anthony.
And then the next one is, are attribute rules saved in a pro project from Justin Jacobs?
No, Justin, they actually are stored in the geodatabase. They are not stored in the fabric or in the project file, but they are stored in the geodatabase, which means that they go with the data, and it doesn't matter what project you open them up with, which also means that if you go and create an attribute rule and apply it to that data, no matter where that data gets executed or edited, it will automatically fire off those attribute rules. So if you go and put this over onto Portal and share it out, then if it's editable on Portal, those attribute rules will fire off when you edit them. When you put it over on a field application with your geodatabase, it also will go and fire off then. So it's stored with the data, not in the project itself. So again, if somebody else opens up that data in a different project, they get those attribute rules. They are stored with the data. Good question now. Yeah. Okay. Is that it, Michael? We got any others?
No, Frank, we got some more. If you want, I can keep going.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
What happens if, hold on, that just moved as soon as I started reading it. What happens if we have a field in the layer set as read only? For example, if acres is set as read only, then will the attribute rule still calculate? The underlying question is, can we set fields to be edited by attribute rules, but not manually edited in the attributes, not manually edited in the attribute rule?
You know, that's a great question. We're going to go and do that. So this rule goes and works on the map acres, right? So I'm going to go and save this so that the map acres is now read only on here. And if I go in here and just select this file here and go in here, you can see that I cannot edit the map acres. But if I go and edit the vertices here on here, it changed the map acres so that yes, you can actually go and have the attribute rule work against an attribute that is marked as read only, and it will still work against that. That's a great question. Yeah.
Next one is there a way to distinguish between geometry change and attribute change similar to attribute assistant? So rules fire off only when geometry changes. Jason Clemens.
Jason, at the moment, I do not believe there's a way to go and do that out of the box. All right, so it might be that you can set up an arcade expression and include it in that expression, only make that change if the geometry changes. If the shape field actually is modified, that's when it fires off and executes. That's where that power of arcade comes in. But as right now, the triggers are just very simple triggers. There's when you create it, when you update it, or when you delete it. That's when it fires off. So I would suspect that you could do it with arcade, but you would have to put that into the expression on here.
Next one is, are attribute rules editable in Portal or online? Jessica Burr.
Ah, interesting. So actually, the attribute rule is stored with the geometry. And once you go and take that geodatabase, with the geodatabase, and once you take that geodatabase and share it out and serve it out, in order to make an edit change to the attribute rule, you actually have to stop the service, make the change in the attribute rule, and then start the service again. You don't have to delete the service, but you do at least have to stop it and make that change to the attribute rule, and then start up the service again and share it out. So you can edit it, but you can't edit it while it's actively being shared out. You have to stop it, make the edit change, and then go and reshare it out again. Great questions.
We got two more, and then I'm going to go ahead and let you keep going. Do the attribute rules apply when features are created in ArcGIS Online from feature services published in Arc Pro? Krista Walsh.
Yes. The answer is yes.
And what situations would change on delete be useful?
That's a really interesting question, because this is actually ArcGIS Pro 2.9 that I'm actually using here. And that was the first time I actually noticed that delete was on here. So I'd have to think about that a little bit more when you would go and do that. So initial thought is that one of the things that you can do with Arcade is you can actually go and have the Arcade expression evaluate and impact other services, other feature classes. And we're going to see that when I go and do an intersection, where I go take data from one feature class and put it into this one. And you can have Arcade actually go and create, for example, maybe you have a point feature class, and every time you put a new point feature class, and you also want to create a buffer polygon in another feature class. Well, possibly on the delete, when you go to delete that point, you might want it to go and automatically delete the corresponding buffer polygon that's on there. So off the top of my head, that's the first instance I would think of, is that if you have some related feature in another feature class, you could use this delete trigger to go and maintain referential integrity between your feature classes. You could have it automatically delete that other thing that's related to the thing that you just delete. You know, like I said, that was the first time I actually noticed that there was the delete trigger on here, was when I was going through. All right, are we ready?
Ready when you are, Frank.
We're all caught up? Okay, so that's just a simple calculation. Let's do another one real fast, where I go and copy the values to see how you can go and utilize these attribute rules to go and pull information and restructure it if you want. So what I'm going to do is go use the same feature class, and I'll just open this up so we can see this a little bit and show you what's in here. So I have here a PCN field. I also have here a DOR PCN field and a parcel number field. These DOR PCN and parcel number, these are identical. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and write an arcade script and write an attribute rule that says, when the DOR PCN is input, automatically populate the same one over in the parcel num field. All right. So let's go and add one here. And this is just going to be called copy DOR PCN field on here. And I'm not going to put description on here. I'm just going to tell it that it's going to go against the parcel no field. And I'm going to pull up the expression builder. And basically, I'm just going to say that when I put something in the DOR PCN, go and take, again, there's that global variable, $ feature, to go and take the value that's stored in the DOR PCN field and populate it inside the parcel numbered field. So I'm going to validate it, say go ahead and do that when I insert it and when I update it, so that when I update the DOR PCN field, it will automatically go and populate that into the PCN. Now notice the save field. The save option is not in here, and it says in 2.9, the save button is currently disabled due to unsaved edits in the projects. So let me go back to here, and let's discard this one here. Discard that edit. Let's go and save that. We're done here. Let me go back here. And in fact, my save is now available. So again, I have two attribute rules here. The first one is going to calculate the acreage field and the map acres. The second one is going to copy any DOR PCN values and move them over to the parcel no. All right, let's go out of here. Let's go to create. Well, let's create a parcel polygon in here. On here, let's go to my attributes and see, okay, there's the DOR PCN. Here is the map acres automatically calculated read only. So my DOR PCN, when I go and populate something in here, and this is just a random number, when I do it, as soon as I hit enter, let me go and make sure that this is auto apply. So we'll see it here. Oh, as soon as I hit auto apply, notice it copied whatever value was here and moved it over into this other attribute field, so that as I change this and hit apply, it automatically goes and populates it. So again, that attribute rule is immediately evaluated as soon as I make an update in the geometry, or as soon as I make an update in the attributes, any of the attribute fields on there, automatically gets evaluated. Now, because this is arcade, I can go and tell it to not just copy things over, but I can tell it to replace things in here. So let me go and modify this one just a little bit and tell it to replace in this value any periods with dashes. All right, so it's going to go and do a replace function, and it's going to look at anything that's in the DOR PCN that has a period on it and replace it with a dash. Make sure it's valid, make sure it's valid. Let me go back here and go back to edits and save that edit so that I can save this again. All right, so let's go back here to my attributes, and you'll note if I just make a simple change here, it's going to go and immediately go and take all the periods in the DOR PCN and replace them with dashes on here. So again, I can set it up so that it automatically does all sorts of functionality against these values that I get stored in here. So we can show it it's more than just a simple calculation. We can do all sorts of string manipulation, or we can do concatenation between them on here. Michael, are we good yet? Any questions?
We got one more. How many attribute rules are too many when it starts affecting editing performance?
I can tell you from experience, It's not necessarily the number of attribute rules, but what you have those attribute rules doing. And I'm going to demonstrate it the next time. I'm going to actually have an intersect performed against a something, and that will automatically go and take, it'll be a little bit costly as far as what it actually does. It's actually going to perform an intersection against there. It's not necessarily that the rule itself, the number of rules is going to be cost prohibitive, but it's the actual arcade expressions and what's being done in arcade that's going to cost you a little bit of CPU evaluations. The reality is that most of us that are editors, we're the slowest component on here. Arcade's going to be much faster. These attribute rules are going to be much faster. We're going to slow it down then, you know, in doing evaluations across here. So let's go and look at this. This is what I'm going to ask you to do now is I'm going to create a calculation rule where when I go and input a parcel, I want it to go and intersect against another layer. I want it to go and intersect against a section layer and pull out from there some values out of that one and then store them in my parcel feature class. So I'm going to do an intersection on here. All right, so let's go in here now. Let's go and save everything we have here. Let's turn on our sections. Let's just show you what the sections look like on here. And they have section township range. They also have way over here, they have an str field, which has all of these concatenated together in there. By the way, an attribute rule goes and cats them together. As soon as you populate them, it will take this one and add this one and add this one and populate that one automatically in there. But that's what we have. We have a section polygon feature class. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and create a new rule. All right, and I'm going to create a new rule, and this rule is going to be called calc str. And this is going to go and populate the str field. And the expression I'm going to do is I'm going to go and cheat a little bit. And I think I've got arcade in expression. There we go. So again, arcade is an amazing language. And again, if you can attend Ned's session, Ned's really good at this. I still hack at it a lot, but it's really good. So what this expression does is it first sets up a variable. This variable buff is it's going to tell it that it's going to go and buffer whatever feature I create, whatever $ feature, it's going to evaluate. It's just going to buffer it by 0.001 feet inside of it. And it's just a simple thing. I want to try to match what's in there. Then it's going to go in and create a variable called intersects layer, and it's going to use an intersects function against a feature set by name. And this is going to be against another layer that's in your data store. In this case, it's going to go against the sections polygon feature class, and it's going to apply that buffer to this intersection, and it's going to give me a count. It's going to call a variable called int count, and it's going to tell us how many are in there. I'm going to set up initialize that variable called expression, and if it is equal to 0, it doesn't intersect the section. I'm just going to tell it to go and put in there. It's not in a section. All right. So we'll go and populate that inside that attribute field. Then what I'm going to go and do is say for every single intersection it does have, to go and calculate, pull out the str field, and then to go and store that into a variable called expr, and then return that expr. Sections not found. Let's see what the real name of this is. I think it's called section underscore polygons. There we go. Section underscore polygons is the name of this here, but it's actually on the table contents, it's just called sections. So then I go and tell it when I want to execute this. When I first create this, I want to go in, and then when I update it. All right, and that's all I'm going to go and do on this, and say save this out. So now what this is going to do is it's going to go and take, and every time I create a polygon, it's going to go and intersect against a section. Now, by the way, these sections, just to make sure it's labeling it, and I believe it is, let's see if I turn off the sections here, it's that red number that's popping up here. So this is section 2, this is section 35. Let's see if we can do something here. Let's create a polygon here, parcel polygon, and let's intersect it here. And let's go to attributes, and it will go and tell us that here's the acreage it calculated. We don't have a value in the DOR PCN yet, so it hasn't copied anything. But if you look, it automatically intersected the section polygon and pulled out the value that's stored in there for me. And to just prove that it's not trickery, that it's actually working, I'll do it here, and then you can see that it actually pulled it out of there to go and populate that field. Now what that means is that you can set up an expression on an attribute rule, and I've done this, where as you create a parcel polygon, it goes and intersects the townships, the ranges, the sections, the subdivisions, the blocks, and the lots to actually populate a majority of your parcel control number of the PCN, automatically have it populated. And I've done this again for multiple clients, is where as I go and create a parcel, it will go and determine what municipality it's in and automatically populate that, and what the possibilities are endless on here. So with that, I'm going to stop again. Michael, do we have any questions now?
Not at this moment, and we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay, so I'll be able to at least go over a constraint rule. A constraint rule, so the calculate rule allows you to go and automatically populate things. A constraint rule says it's going to evaluate it and return a Boolean that says it's either true or it's false. And you determine what the error message is and what it goes and populates. If it's true, it allows the edit to go forward. But if it's false, it returns an error message and says, you can't do this because you haven't populated this. One of the ways in which this is often done is in here, you can populate a constraint rule. Now the constraint rule, let's see if I have one here. I think I do, real quickly. Must have value, and I can do it any of these. Notice this doesn't have a field on it. That's built into the arcade expression. And let's see here, must have value. All right, so in this case, what I'm doing is I'm saying that if the feature is empty and it doesn't have a value in the PCN, to return false. Otherwise, return it true. So again, if it's false, it's an error, meaning there's nothing in there. So again, I'm evaluating if on this feature, the DOR PCN is empty, return false. Okay. So then I have to tell it, well, what do you want to do? In this case, I want to go and tell it to return an error message. Let's give it something else. And then I could say, you must have a DOR PCN, and tell it to trigger that on here and on here. Tell it to save it. Now a constraint attribute field is different in that it gets populated. So as I go and create a new parcel, without populating anything in, notice what happens. It does not let me finish this edit, and it says the rule is must have a value. The triggering event is the insert, and it says you must have a DOR PCN on here. So in order to go and finish this, I have to go and actually put an attribute in that value for it to go and work. So if I go in here, this is again my feature template for DOR PCNs. Here's the geometry edits. If I go over here and click over here, this will allow me to go and do an edit here, and I can now go and finish editing this because I have a value in there. So, and I can see here that there's the DOR PCN. Here's where it copied it over and did that replace on it. Here's where it calculated the actual and pulled the value out of the sections polygon. And finally, here is the acreage on here.
We got
So
about three questions. We got about three questions in 2 minutes, 4 questions
Perfect.
now.
Go ahead.
All right. So how do you handle insertions of multiple sections?
Then you've got to go. So if you've got something that goes and spans multiple sections, like this thing here, so when I do that, in this case, in my attribute, in my arcade expression that I calculated, I told it to go and take the first one, but you can also go and evaluate it and have it evaluate that arcade expression and determine whether or not it's more than one section that it's in there, and have it automatically go and return an error or I'll put something else in there. So it's all in the arcade expression as far as how you go and what actually comes out of here. In this case, I told it just to take the first one in here, take that first one and put it in there. All right, that's a good question though. Yeah. Again, it's all about the arcade. Go ahead.
Sorry. Do constraint rules replace domains?
No. They can supplement domains, but they cannot replace them. Domain is basically a lookup value where you have a set of values that you have to put in there, and it prevents the user from inputting an invalid value. Think of a constraint rule as being, and again, I'm a parcel editor, so I think about it this way. A constraint rule can make sure that an attribute field is populated, or make sure that you don't create sliver polygons by doing evaluation to say if the area on this polygon is too small, don't let you create something too small, don't let you create something too big. Don't let me go and build a parcel polygon in the middle of a lake. So I can constrain and make sure that there's some valid values that are being built on here. From a parcel standpoint, there's also some new rules being implemented into parcel fabric where you have the ability to say that if the COGO distance that I input is outside of a range, don't let you go and build a parcel polygon if the lines don't match what they're actually mapped at within a certain variance. So again, it's a way to go and evaluate something and make sure that the value that's stored in that attribute rule is valid before you actually move forward with it. Go ahead, Michael, another question.
Why does the data set need a global ID field?
Yes. I wish I could tell you why, and I share with people all the time. How to is an easy answer. Why is a tougher answer? Why is it designed that way. I can tell you it's just designed that way. You need global IDs on here for attribute rules to be part of this. That's all. Sorry.
Can we add a warning instead of an error constraint?
At the moment, no. It returns you that error constraint, and unfortunately, I personally don't like the actual function or the formatting of that error complaint, but that's all you can do at the moment.
Okay, and the very last one is not a question, but a compliment. Very informative. This session is being recorded and will be on YouTube channel later, correct? What is the link to the YouTube channel? So yes, all sessions today are being recorded and they will be on the Shrug GIS YouTube channel, and we will be emailing that out to all attendees.
Perfect. Do I have any time left?
We are actually 2 minutes over our time, Frank, but I let you go because we had a couple of questions. We are more than welcome to stay for another minute or two to answer one more question, but then we got to wrap it up because we got the next session coming up.
Let's wrap it up then. Let's wrap it up. Any other questions or anything else, you can forward them to frank@pandaconsulting.com. And thank you for letting me do this session. All right.
Thank you, Frank. We enjoyed it. And again, the link will be up here soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.